Have you ever stopped to think about what actually goes into the phone in your hand? Or your car? Even the concrete under your house? It's pretty incredible when you consider the journey those raw materials took, starting way deep inside the earth, to become the stuff you use every day. Okay, so let's unpack this. We've got this stack of sources here, detailing the whole anatomy of a mine, from the very first idea, literally, all the way to handing the land back. Our mission today is to do a deep dive into this whole mining life cycle. We're going to pull back the curtain on the stages you maybe don't hear about, the surprising economics, the sheer engineering involved, and really dig into the big environmental and social questions that come with getting these essential minerals out of the ground. This isn't just digging a hole. It's this meticulously planned, incredibly risky, and frankly, massively impactful thing.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is how interconnected it all is, every single stage, and how modern mining really tries to emphasize a full circle approach now, thinking about rehabilitation, about the community's future right from the get-go.
So it all kicks off with how nature scattered these minerals around, right? This idea of orogenesis. We need this stuff, and the Earth just has it somewhere.
Exactly. Orogenesis is the starting point. But the thing is, nature's distribution is often a mixed bag. You might be looking for copper primarily, but, the gold in your phone, or maybe arsenic for some tech uses. That often just comes along as a valuable byproduct. It's rarely just one clean element you find. It's more like a geological cocktail. Copper ores might have bornite, gold might be in calaverite. It's complex.
And these deposits aren't just random scatterings. They form through specific, powerful geological events.
That's right. You've got things like hydrothermal processes, think superhot, mineral-rich water flowing through rock cracks, leaving minerals behind over ages. Then there are igneous processes, where minerals basically crystallize out of cooling magma deep down. Metamorphic processes, too, from heat and pressure. Sedimentary deposits, where minerals precipitate out of water, maybe on ancient seabeds. And placer deposits, where water, like rivers, concentrates heavy stuff like gold. Think gold panning. But what's key is the valuable mineral is almost never pure. It's mixed with worthless stuff, we call that gangue, all inside the host rock, which also has no value itself.
So nature does its slow, amazing work, then we step in. And that brings us to exploration, which sounds like, finding that needle in a giant haystack.
It really is. Finding an economic mineral deposit, it's incredibly difficult and expensive. There was this study, Roscoe in 1971. It found that out of maybe 1,000 identified mineral prospects, only one eventually becomes a mine.
Wow, 1 in 1,000.
Yeah. It's like finding a needle in a haystack and then finding out only 1 in 1,000 of those needles is actually worth anything.
That's wild. And how we search has changed too, right? It's not just picks and shovels near the surface anymore.
That's brownfield exploration near old mines. It still happens. But yeah, a lot now is this three-dimensional search for hidden blind deposits deep down. That's greenfield exploration, often in totally new areas.
How does that work?
It's usually 3 stages. First, area selection. Lots of office work, databases, remote sensing, satellite stuff to narrow down target zones. Then, field data gathering, ground surveys, mapping, and critically drilling. Drilling is really the main way to confirm if something's actually down there, how much, what quality, and finally, you evaluate all that data.
And there are environmental rules, even at this early stage.
Oh, absolutely. Best practices like minimizing disturbance, saving topsoil for later, managing water from drilling properly. And socially, it's crucial to talk to communities right away, respect land ownership, including traditional or communal rights. That's vital.
Speaking of discoveries, I remember reading about a really shady practice, salting, making a find look way better than it is.
Yes, salting. It's unfortunately a dishonorable method, making a prospect seem richer. The big infamous case was Bre-X back in '96. A small Canadian company claimed this massive gold find in Indonesia, billions of dollars worth.
I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, the market went crazy. Even the government got involved. But then independent drilling showed it was a total hoax. Someone had been adding gold flakes to the sample.
Just sprinkling gold in. Unbelievable.
Pretty much. Either before or after assaying. The whole thing collapsed. Huge financial losses, massive embarrassment. And while deliberate fraud like Bre-X is rare, accidental salting can happen too, just from carelessness in handling samples. Shows how vital precision and integrity are.
Okay, so we've found our potential needle. Hopefully it's not salted. But just finding it isn't enough. And now comes the brutal reality check. Is it actually worth mining? This is where the economics really hit, right?
Absolutely. A mineral deposit only becomes an ore deposit if you can make money extracting it. And the key concept here is the cutoff grade, or COG. It's the minimum metal content that makes mining profitable. The economic floor, basically.
The gatekeepers. What kind of grades are we talking about? Is it vastly different for different metals?
Oh, hugely different. For something like iron ore, you generally need at least, say, 50% iron content to even be considered interesting. But for gold, it can be incredibly low.
Yeah.
Sometimes just 11,000th of 1%, which is tiny.
Ah.
Yeah, like the Tom Price iron ore mine in Australia, that's super rich, over 65% iron. But gold is often measured in grams per ton. And the crucial thing is, this cutoff grade isn't static, it moves. It depends on metal prices, technology, the deposit size and location, processing costs. It's dynamic.
And here's what I found really interesting. This idea that waste rock isn't always waste.
Right.
It can actually become valuable later. How does that work?
It's a fascinating consequence. If metal prices shoot up, suddenly that old waste dump, which was uneconomic before, might now contain enough metal above the new cutoff grade to be worth processing. So yeah, the definition of ore versus waste can literally change overnight or over the mine's life.
That creates a weird tension, doesn't it? Between, say, the country wanting to mine everything possible and the company needing to make a profit.
Exactly. Host countries often want a lower cutoff grade to maximize the total resource recovered. Investors, understandably, push for a higher cutoff grade for better returns. This can mean a lot of lower grade material gets left in the ground, maybe forever, just because it didn't meet the economic threshold at that specific time.
Then there's this enrichment factor concept, too. How much more concentrated a mineral needs to be than average. I heard mercury ranks higher than gold, surprisingly.
That's right. It really highlights just how rare these economic concentrations are. Nature had to do something pretty special to make them mineable. It's a geological lottery, really.
So once you think you have something potentially economic, you start this whole feasibility journey. It sounds like a series of hurdles to jump over before you get a final yes or no.
It really is. It's a rigorous, multi-stage process to check if the project is technically possible, environmentally sound, and economically viable. Typically, there are 3 levels of engineering studies. First, a conceptual or scoping study, very preliminary, maybe only 50% accuracy. Its job is basically to spot any fatal flaws early on. Is this even worth looking at closely?
Just a quick check.
If it passes that, you move to a pre-feasibility study. This gets more detail, maybe 25% accuracy. You start defining the resource and reserve more clearly, identify key limits, geological, economic, technical, environmental, political constraints.
Okay.
And finally, the big one, the Bankable Feasibility Study, or BFS. This is the most detailed, highest accuracy, maybe 10–15%, often needs independent experts. This is the document you take to the bank to get financing. It's the basis for the final go-no-go decision.
The bankable part is key. That's what convinces investors.
Exactly, and this process leads to a really important distinction we need to make between a mineral resource and a mineral reserve.
Okay, what's the difference there?
So a mineral resource is basically a geological estimate. Based on drilling and sampling, geologists infer or indicate or measure how much mineralization might be there. It's about geology. A mineral reserve, however, is an economic term. It's the part of that resource, specifically the measured or indicated part, that can actually be mined profitably, as proven by at least a pre-feasibility study.
So resource is what's potentially there. Reserve is what you can realistically profitably get out.
You got it. And alongside these technical studies, you absolutely need the environmental and social impact assessment, the ESIA. That's critical for showing the project is viable on those fronts too, and governments usually demand it before giving approval.
And even after all that work, a feasibility study doesn't guarantee a mine gets built. I saw a stat, maybe 1 in 10 proposals in Australia that get a study. Actually, go ahead.
Yeah, that 1997 estimate suggested something like that. It might be a bit pessimistic, maybe some get delayed rather than canceled, but it definitely shows how many hurdles there are, and the risks involved are just huge.
Beyond the geology being uncertain, what are the other big risks? The elephants in the room.
Geological risk is massive. One source said, the only way to be certain is to mine it. You might hit unexpected water flows, or the rock might be unstable. Big problems. Then there are metallurgical risks. Will the processing actually recover the metal you expect? Or will nasty elements like arsenic or mercury pop up and cause processing nightmares or make the concentrate unsellable?
And the economics must be terrifying. Prices swinging wildly.
Absolutely. Metal prices bounce all over the place, set internationally, and the sheer cost of building a modern mine is astronomical billions sometimes. Exchange rates can kill you too. But environmental and social risks are almost always there, even with good planning. Social tensions can literally shut a mine down, like Bougainville Copper and PNG. That was civil unrest.
And political risk,
Yeah.
especially in some parts of the world.
Yeah, that's a big one, particularly in countries with less stable governments or legal systems. A government might suddenly change tax rules or royalty rates after you've already sunk billions into the ground. That can lead to what's called high-grading companies. Just mine the richest, easiest ore and leave the rest because it's no longer profitable under the new rules, which isn't great for the country's long-term resource use.
And you mentioned these local content policies, trying to get more local benefit, right? Like jobs or ownership.
Yes, the intention is good employment quotas, mandatory local ownership stakes, requirements to process or in country.
I saw examples like Ghana wanting 90+% local managers, Mozambique aiming for 20% local equity, Indonesia requiring majority investment to locals after 10 years.
Those are real examples. And while the goal is laudable, making them work is tricky. How do you value a mine for local buy-in? How do you attract massive foreign investment if they have to give up control after just a decade? It's really complex.
So after all this potential excitement, exploration studies. Sometimes a project just stalls, development stops. And that has its own negative consequences, right? It's not just a missed opportunity.
No, it definitely does. When development halts, you're often left with the environmental scars from exploration drill roads, cleared areas. One source called it nothing but an eyesore in a Philippines nickel case. Unless someone pays for costly rehab, that damage just sits there. And for the local communities, imagine anticipating jobs, business opportunities, maybe making plans based on the mine coming, and then nothing happens. It's confusing, disheartening. Plus, environmental approvals can expire, meaning more delays and rework if the project ever restarts.
Okay, but let's say it does get the final green light. Then you actually build the thing. Engineering, procurement, construction, EPC. I heard this phase actually employs more people than running the mine later.
That's often true, yeah. It's a huge surge of activity, like building a small, temporary city. And remember, even after the main ESA approval, the company needs a whole raft of other permits before construction starts. It can be dozens, hundreds sometimes. For a small gold mine in Indonesia, the list covered everything from company setup to hazardous waste permits.
Sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare waiting to happen. Delays, costs.
It absolutely can be. That Vale nickel example in Sulawesi, a forestry permit delay cost them millions just waiting. And then there's land acquisition. That's huge. You get speculators driving up prices, conflicts between formal property rights and traditional land use. It can get really messy. And the construction itself. Noise, dust, heavy traffic disrupting local life. Plus, you bring in this big, often transient workforce that needs careful management to avoid social problems, rising crime, disease transmission, that kind of thing.
And if it's outside contractors doing the building, the EPC guys, do they have the same long-term view as the mine owner?
That's a really important point. Often, no. The EPC contractor's main goal is to build it on time, on budget. They might not be as focused on building community relationships or managing every environmental detail meticulously because they'll be gone once it's built. So the mine owner can inherit problems, environmental damage, strained community relations caused during construction. Strong oversight and clear policies from the owner are essential right from the start of EPC.
Right, so construction's done. Now the actual mining. First step is clearing the land, right? Big visual impact. Removes habitat?
Yes, it's often the most visually stark impact initially. And while the total land area mined nationally might be small, like that 0.02% figure for Australia locally, the impact is huge. And sometimes even small areas are unique or ecologically vital. After clearing, that topsoil is carefully stripped and stockpiled. That's crucial. You need it for rehabilitation later. Ideally, in open-pit mines, they try to place it back on reshaped areas quite early.
And then the main event, shifting massive amounts of waste rock to get to the ore.
Exactly. The amount of waste rock, the overburden, can be enormous. The stripping ratio waste to ore can be higher than 20-to-1 for some high-grade deposits. Just think about moving 20 tons of rock for every 1 ton of ore.
How do they do that? Drilling and blasting.
Yep. Drilling holes, packing them with explosives, and boom. This creates dust plumes more an aesthetic issue than health risk usually, but people hate it. And the noise and vibration from blasting. Major community complaints often. Plus, greenhouse gases from the explosives and machinery. Then you have giant shovels or loaders scooping it up, and huge haul trucks moving it. Main impacts there are dust from the haul roads. They try to control it with constant watering and noise, especially those backup beepers on trucks at night. And again, lots of fuel burned, so GHG emissions.
You mentioned pipelines are sometimes better environmentally for moving material.
For transporting processed concentrate over long distances, yes, pipelines generally have a lower continuous impact than trucks or trains, though building them requires land access initially.
Okay, so the ore is finally out. Now it needs processing, right? Or dressing, turning rock into something actually usable.
Correct. Most ore isn't rich enough to just ship straight to a smelter, so it gets processed, usually right near the mine site. First step is typically milling and grinding, crushing the rock down into really fine particles like sand or silt. This is needed to physically liberate the tiny, valuable mineral grains from the worthless gang rock they're stuck in.
And that takes a lot of energy.
An immense amount. It's usually the single most energy-intensive and therefore most expensive part of the whole operation. The big indirect impact is the greenhouse gases, if that energy comes from fossil fuels.
Okay, so it's ground down, then you separate the good stuff out. Concentrated.
Exactly. This is concentration. And the workhorse method for many metals, especially sulfides like copper, is froth flotation.
How did that work? Sounds bubbly.
It is. You mix the finely ground ore slurry with water and specific chemicals, collectors, frothers, then you bubble air through it. The chemicals make the target mineral particles stick to the air bubbles and float to the top in a froth. The unwanted gangue material doesn't float, so it sinks. You scrape the froth off, and voila, you have your concentrate.
Clever. Are there other methods?
Oh, yes. Gravity concentration, basically, using density differences, like panning for gold, but on an industrial scale. And magnetic separation, if the mineral you want is magnetic, like iron ore.
And this is where some of those chemicals come in that cause public concern, like cyanide.
While flotation uses specific reagents, the ones that really grab headlines are things like mercury, historically used for gold amalgamation, and cyanide, which is widely used today to leach gold out of ore. Because of their toxicity, their use is, quite rightly, associated in the public mind with potential environmental disaster and murder, as one source puts it. So their handling and disposal are incredibly strictly regulated.
And the waste from all this processing, the tailings, that's a huge issue?
It is the biggest environmental challenge for most mines. Tailings are that fine, ground-up rock left over after the valuable minerals are removed. You produce enormous volumes of it, basically the same tonnage as the ore you mined. Disposing of it safely, usually in large engineered dams or ponds, and ensuring it doesn't contaminate water long-term is absolutely critical. It can contain leftover processing chemicals or minerals that can cause acid drainage later.
You mentioned thickening. What's that?
That's a step where they let the tailings slurry settle in large tanks called thickeners. It removes a lot of the water, which can then be recycled back into the process, saving fresh water and reducing the amount of water and therefore the size of the pond needed for final tailings storage.
Okay, so you've got your concentrate, now you just store it and ship it. Simple, right?
Not always so simple. Storage areas need careful design to prevent runoff or leachate escaping and contaminating soil or water. Dewatering the concentrate produces effluent that needs managing, and shipping can face huge public opposition. Remember that Magellan lead case in Western Australia? Public outcry over potential lead dust pollution at one port forced them to stop shipping, switch to sealed containers on trains.
And then people worried about that route too.
Exactly. It sparked opposition about safety along the new rail route and at the alternative port. It shows how sensitive the transport leg can be.
Unless it's something really valuable like gold.
Right. For high-value, low-volume things like gold doré bars or diamonds, they often fly it out under high security. Less hassle, more secure.
So beyond the mine pit and the processing plant, there's all this other stuff needed to make it work. The ancillary facilities, like a hidden support network.
That's a good way to put it. They don't directly mine anything, but they're essential. Power stations, water pipelines, ports, access roads, storage areas for fuel and chemicals. Sometimes whole towns built for workers, medical clinics, even quarries for construction materials.
And these have their own environmental footprint too.
Absolutely. While maybe less dramatic than the mine itself, their impacts add up and are important. Sometimes they need their own separate environmental assessments. Think about it. Ports mean dredging, ship traffic, potential spills. Airports mean land clearing, Noise. Access roads, especially haul roads, cut through landscapes, cause erosion, maybe generate acid if the rock is right, increase dust.
And they open up previously wild areas.
That's a big one. New roads can lead to illegal hunting or logging. Pipelines and conveyors are often better environmentally than roads, but still need land. Storage areas for fuel, chemicals, huge tanks sometimes, risk of spills, leaks, contaminated runoff. They need proper containment.
And mine towns. Building a whole new town must have impacts.
Yeah, for sure. Finding suitable land, dealing with sewage and waste, the social effects. But sometimes these towns bring facilities like hospitals or schools that the region never had before. It's complex. They can become regional hubs. Some even have golf courses.
Power generation, too. Mines need tons of power.
Massive amounts. Many remote mines have their own power plants, often diesel or even coal-fired. So you have emissions, fuel handling risks, ash disposal if it's coal. And those quarries and borrow pits, they're needed for construction materials, like gravel for roads or concrete aggregate. They're often outside the main mine area, but are essentially mini mines themselves, needing ongoing management and eventual rehabilitation.
Okay, this brings us towards the end of the line, mine closure. It sounds like nowadays this isn't just an afterthought. It's planned from the start.
Yes, ideally. Modern practice is designed for closure. It means thinking about how you'll eventually close the mine safely and effectively, right from the initial design phase. Preliminary closure plans are made early and then updated throughout the mine's life as things change.
And the main goal?
The core aim is to leave all the disturbed areas safe and stable. Physically safe, so slopes don't collapse, openings are sealed. Environmentally stable, meaning non-polluting, especially regarding water quality. And ideally capable of supporting some agreed-upon future land use. Key activities include decommissioning buildings and equipment, sealing shafts and tunnels, reshaping and stabilizing waste dumps and pit walls, maybe installing long-term water treatment systems for things like acid rock drainage. And managing the social transition is huge too.
What are the really tough, long-lasting challenges in closure?
Socially, it's the bust after the boom. Job losses are devastating. Businesses that relied on the mine often collapse. Community programs funded by the mine stop, it can leave a big hole. Environmentally, long-term water management is probably the biggest challenge. Water is always trying to reshape the landscape, eroding slopes, filling pits, seeping through waste rock and tailings. Managing that flow and its quality can be a centuries-long task.
And you mentioned acid rock drainage, ARD. That sounds particularly nasty.
It is. It's been called the largest environmental problem facing the U.S. mining industry. It happens when certain sulfide minerals, common in mine waste, are exposed to air and water. They react to form sulfuric acid. This acid can then leach heavy metals from the rock, creating toxic water that can pollute streams and groundwater for hundreds, even thousands of years if not managed. It can come from waste rock piles, tailings, pit walls, underground workings, anywhere the rock is exposed.
A problem that literally lasts forever.
Potentially, yes. It requires ongoing, often perpetual treatment or very clever preventative design.
And just physical dangers, too. Old tunnels and shafts.
Right. Unsecured openings are dangerous. People or animals could fall in, get trapped, encounter bad air, so sealing them properly is essential for safety.
But closure isn't always forever, is it? Mines can go into care and maintenance.
Exactly. If metal prices crash or there's some other major issue, a mine might shut down temporarily but maintain the site, hoping to reopen later. The Climax molybdenum mine in Colorado is a famous example. It closed and reopened several times over many decades as the market changed. New technology might also make old, previously uneconomic areas worth revisiting.
But sometimes they close for good, due to accidents or opposition.
Yes. Some mines are forced to close permanently because of major environmental disasters like the Marcopper spill in the Philippines, or because of overwhelming public opposition or conflict like Bougainville, or simply because they become fundamentally unsafe or uneconomic to continue.
There was a really interesting case study about remediation in France, the Alsace potash mines.
Right.
It sounded quite comprehensive.
Yes, the Mines de Potasse d'Alsace, a great example of tackling a legacy issue. Over 100 years of mining left these huge salt waste piles, which were contaminating groundwater. Their approach is really multi-pronged. They're reshaping and capping some piles with impermeable layers, plastic, clay, to stop rainwater getting in and washing salt out. For others, they're actually accelerating the salt, dissolving, collecting the brine, and discharging it into the Rhine River in a controlled way, carefully monitoring the impact.
And they're doing more than just cleaning up the environment. They're focused on the community, too.
That's what's really impressive. They're actively converting the old mine sites for new industrial uses, offering incentives for businesses to locate there. They're refurbishing old mine buildings for new purposes, and critically, they're running training programs to help former mine workers find new jobs. They even created a comic book to explain the complex closure plans to the local community. It shows a real commitment to communication and helping the region transition beyond mining.
Wow, that's quite a story.
It really is. And if you connect all these dots, the whole mining life cycle, it's this incredible display of human ingenuity, right? And our dependence on these materials. But it's also a really stark reminder that every time we pull something out of the ground, there are consequences, often very long-term consequences. And they demand equally long-term, thoughtful solutions, planning for the future, not just for the extraction phase.
And there you have it, a pretty deep dive into the full anatomy of a mine, from how ore forms deep in the earth right through to trying to put things back together at the end. It's definitely more than just digging a hole, isn't it? It's this incredibly complex, high-stakes process with impacts that ripple outwards in so many ways. So what does this all mean for you listening? Maybe the next time you pick up your phone or get in your car or even just look at the buildings around you, perhaps you'll see a bit more behind the materials, a bit more of the Earth's deep history, the massive human effort, the intricate planning, the successes, and the challenges involved in bringing those resources to you. And it leaves you with a pretty big thought, doesn't it? If the economics of a mine can change on a dime based on global markets, and the environmental and social costs can last for, well, potentially centuries, how do we actually figure out the true worth of mining something? Not just the value today, but the value or cost for generations still to come. Something to think about.
We definitely encourage you to keep exploring how the stuff around you gets made, where it comes from, and the impact it has.